Hello guys and welcome back to DarkHorse FM, and in this video we're going to be looking at Diego Simeone's 4-4-2 tactic, particularly the system and how it works and how it has been so effective, because we know Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid to be quite a defensive team, but 4-4-2 tactics we know as well that it's a defensive system, or it favors defensive teams or teams that are not very technically gifted in every department. So in this video I'm going to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the 4-4-2, the basic strengths and weaknesses, and then we're going to look at how Diego Simeone was actually able to implement a different style of play using the 4-4-2 system, because as much as we know they're very defensive, they have a unique way of playing and they're quite aggressive as well, which makes them very successful using that 4-4-2 tactic. So we're going to look at that today and try to replicate that to some degree on Football Manager and then see how well we're doing. So I've been working with Atletico Madrid on Football Manager 2023 for about one season now, and I kind of know their players and the player attributes and who goes where, and it's good that João Felix is back from Chelsea right now on my save, so I can actually include him in the system that I'm trying to replicate in this 4-4-2 tactic. I'm going to consider, in fact, I did consider in research Diego Simeone's 2014 tactic, his 2016 tactic, that's the tactic that actually went all the way to the Champions League semi-final and final against Real Madrid, I think, one of those seasons, and then also the recent 2021 season when they had a different spell with Luis Suarez and João Felix in the team. So I'm going to somehow combine all those systems into one very simple ultimate 4-4-2 tactic representing Diego Simeone's philosophy at Atletico Madrid. So before we look at Diego Simeone's philosophy with the 4-4-2, I'm going to share with you some strengths and weaknesses of the 4-4-2 tactic. Unlike the 4-3-3 DM wide or the 4-2-3-1 system, the 4-4-2 doesn't operate with triangles. It kind of works with squares or quadrilaterals instead, what we would call blocks. So let's just call it blocks. The 4-4-2 works in a block shape where you have two lines of four, that's the flat back four, and then the flat four midfield players, and then the two strikers up front. The strength for this tactic is that you do have two backs of four, and then you can actually defend as a unit and shift from side to side and try to defend that way and be very difficult to break down. We see teams like Burnley under Sean Dyche operate this tactic very effectively, and they were quite known for their defensive solidity as well. Because the team is so strong defensively, you have two players up front that can eagerly press the opposition's back line. You have two strikers. Most tactics do have one striker up front, but the 4-4-2 block actually has two strikers up front that can actually go and hassle the opposition defenders and try to win the ball back when they're far away from their own goal and somewhat trying to play out from the back. The tactic also has numerical superiority on the wings, but I noticed that the 4-2-3-1 and the 4-3-3 DMY do have that numerical superiority, but with the case of the 4-4-2 tactic, the winger and the fullback are a lot closer together now than they are in the other two formations that I listed before. This gives them an advantage when they're pressing from the flank. So the 4-4-2 tactics kind of defends narrowly and then forces the team to go out wide, forces the opposition to try and go out wide, and then you have two players, that's the winger and the fullback, much closer together, and they can actually go and aggressively press you all the way and win possession from there. Now the weaknesses to the 4-4-2 that I've noticed, and even while playing on Football Manager, when I come up against this tactic, I wish I knew this a lot earlier, but now I know it. What the 4-4-2 lacks is in vertical movement. So you'd notice that if you're playing against a 4-4-2, the best way you're going to try to break them down, if you're going to play with a possession-based style of play, it's going to be very difficult to break down the 4-4-2. So you need to find a way to play vertical through balls in through the midfield. And if you're using a 4-4-2 and that you come up against a team that is playing with a lot of triangles like a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 DM, if they find a way to play vertical through balls aggressively through the midfield, they can somehow break those two lines of four. And if they have good runners in midfield or good runners up front, they could also find a way to break the defensive solidity of the 4-4-2. That's probably one thing I know I don't like about the 4-4-2 flat, that there isn't a lot of variation with the tactic as to player movements, as having one central midfielder go ahead of the other, or one coming over to the DM position, or you have your wide playmakers cut inside, something like that. You could do it, you could design the tactic that way, but because of the overall shape of the tactic, it makes your team easily susceptible to through pass or through balls when you're in your shape. Now Diego Simeone found a way to sort of combat this method, even though he's using the flat 4-4-2 as well. Like I mentioned, I kind of combined all the philosophy from the 2014, then the 2016, and then the 2021 system, and kind of put them into a general idea as to what Diego Simeone's team tends to do. First of all, I'm going to start with what they do when they are in possession of the ball. When Atletico Madrid defend deep and then they somehow find a way to win possession of the ball, they are going to be on the run as quickly as possible. They don't always pass too much because they are already sitting too deep, and if you find a way to try and play 1-2 passes to try and get out from the defense, they could lose possession of the ball and then find themselves all the way back in defense again. So to deal with getting ahead, what Atletico Madrid players tend to do, according to Simeone, asking them to do that, is try and run a lot more at defense, try to carry the ball and run with it, dribble a lot more and then carry. That way they can bring everybody out at once, and all the one player that has the ball, let's say for example Yannick Ferreira-Carrasco, has the ball on the left hand side and then he goes on to win possession, or somebody else wins possession and then gets the ball to Carrasco. His objective is to actually run ahead and try to run at the flank as quickly as possible. So when he does that, all the other team members can actually get out of their ship and then get into attacking positions and find a way to actually hit their position on a solid counter attack. Now their main strength is when they are out of possession. While Atletico Madrid do tend to sit deep in their 4-4-2 flat, when the opposition steps all the way out, and then we know that Atletico Madrid are playing with a low block, low to or mid to low block, that's what I'm going to call it, not so deep. They are quite deep, but when the opposition get into their defensive area, then they've gotten past that line of engagement. That's what I'm going to call it from Football 100 terms, so you can actually understand. When they break through that line of engagement, Atletico Madrid players are very aggressive in how they're going to win the ball back. So it's almost like they're playing with a very high trigger press, but with a low block. So the moment the opposition is in that territory, every single player will hassle you until you lose possession of the ball. They will literally tackle you and possibly borderline red card challenge, but they will find a way to get the ball back. And they somehow do this aggressive. They find a way to sit in their mid to low block, 2 backs of 4, and they force the opposition to go all the way out wide. And then once you're out wide, the fullback, the left winger, and to some extent there's a ball winning midfielder or a central midfielder that's going to come across and join in that press, and then they kind of outnumber the team that is on the flank and then find a way to hassle you and win possession of the ball aggressively. Now in a defensive system like this, the one that Atletico Madrid use, you would expect that the goalkeeper is going to be the guy that sort of starts counter attacks for the team, but in Jan Oblak's case it's not really so. He's a very cautious kind of goalkeeper, and he doesn't tend to gift possession of the ball so easily. So when they do win possession of the ball, he's not so eager to try and start counter-attacks off the blocks like that. So I'm going to ask him to play as a super keeper on defend duty, because he's not an out-and-out standard goalkeeper on defense. So it's almost like a bridge between the standard goalkeeper and a sweeper keeper. The two central defenders have the responsibility to get the ball out of the defense. So when they're in possession of the ball, as much as Atletico Madrid look to run at the defense as often as possible, the central defenders have the ability to actually pick long balls. So their plan is to find a way to look for the striker up front. The strikers also operate in a different manner. We're going to get to them very quickly, but the central defenders have the ability to actually play long passes. So when they are in possession of the ball, they will look to find the pass, and if they cannot see the pass, they play the ball out to a more, let's say, a more creative player, usually wide player like Carrasco, like I mentioned before, or on the right hand side, I think Correa plays on the right hand side. They look to get the ball to those guys, and then they can start going on the run, and then everybody can actually run out together. Now, I mentioned the strikers briefly before. In the 4-4-2 system, especially in Atletico Madrid system, the strikers are responsible for actually triggering the press, but only one of the strikers are equipped to do this, because to keep their defensive solidity, the second striker tends to drop into the number 10 role and sort of act like a false 9 or an attacking midfielder of that sort. So he's slightly deeper than a deep line forward. That's why I'm going to opt for kind of like a number 10 role, really. So I think the false 9 suits this position better. But as that player is running deep and acting in number 10 position, the other striker is going to act like a pressing forward and a target forward at the same time. The target forward, because the central defenders are going to look to find this player when they are in possession of the ball. So that long pass is looking for this other center forward. And as much as he is acting as a target forward in attack, his responsibility is to actually press the opposition and hassle them once they are in that defensive line of engagement. Once they get through a line of engagement, he is going to begin the press. Diego Costa was very good at operating in this position, and beside him, the number 10 kind of false 9 deep line role was operated by David Villa. Much later on in 2016, then 2021, the personnel did change, but the philosophy sort of remained the same. Try to keep a compact shape and try to press the opposition from the pressing forwards up front, starting with the 4-4, those double strikers in the 4-4-2, force the opposition out wide and try to hassle them aggressively and win possession from there. So I've gone on to recreate the tactic on Football Manager, and after 13 games in the La Liga season, we've won 11 of those matches. We've drawn 2 times against Real Madrid and Sevilla, and then we haven't lost a game. So in the Champions League, it's quite different because we've been paired with Manchester City. I don't know if that really plays a role, but we have -3 goal defense and we only have 5 points. That's from 1 win and 2 draws. And then we did lose heavily to Manchester City, but that's more like an outlier really. So there's something deeper as to why we lost that game heavily. I think it's down to how deep you sit in Football Manager. It sort of plays a role when you're playing against a team that is much better than you. But this is the tactic that we've gone on to recreate. It's Diego Simeone's 4-4-2 system, and just like I described earlier on the video, we're starting with a low block, very low block, and lower defensive line, lower line of engagement as well. But you can see all the other instructions here. Because I want the team to be very aggressive when the opposition get beyond this low block, there's a more often trigger press. I was opting for much more often at first, but then I realized that we're better off with the more often trigger press, and it sort of helps us keep our shape and allow the players to sort of trigger that press when it's when it's on, rather than just trying to always rush to force the press. The get stuck in instruction is there because of Atletico Madrid. They're very aggressive, so I went on to stick to this. And if you're playing with a team that you're trying to use a low block system, a stay on feet instruction is preferable. But because it's Atletico and they have good tacklers in the team, the get stuck in instruction did work for us in this system. And the defensive line has also been instructed to drop off, and you can see that the pressing trap has been set to force the team outside and try to get them to the wing, so that our wingbacks and left midfielder or right midfielder, the wide midfielder in this case, would actually go and force that press and try to win the ball back in wide areas. In transition, I have no instruction selected for now. The only instruction that you would notice is to distribute to a specific position, and I did mention this earlier before in the target forward / pressing forward on this tactic. So the goalkeeper has been instructed to distribute the ball to this specific position, and that is this player here on the right hand side. And when you look at the team instructions, the tempo is generally higher, and the teams also act to play with a fairly wide attacking width, because we're trying to get the ball into wide areas when we're in possession of the ball and try to whip in those crosses, and that kind of helps the counter-attacking style of play. So the pass into space instruction is also selected for this system, and then you can see that we're asking our team, the moment we get the ball, try and run at the opposition's defense, so we don't have to always play 1-2 passes and lose possession and then find ourselves in a deep shape once again. So once we have possession, everybody's going to try to run ahead and try to force that counter attack. Now for the individual player instructions, they're very specific, and I'm going to start with the opposition instructions. I haven't included any opposition instructions for this tactic because I'm relying on the team's out of possession instructions to actually help us force the opposition out wide and try to win the ball from there. So there's nothing really much in this area that I'm going to do, except I'm doing it in game. So when you go into each player one by one, starting with the goalkeeper in Yano Black, is a super keeper on defense like I described. No instructions selected for him. And then my fullbacks, I want them to actually run ahead when we are in possession of the ball. So what they're going to do, you notice that I've asked my fullbacks to run wide with the ball and then get further forward, even though they are playing as fullbacks on support duty. So they are essentially acting as wing backs when they are in possession of the ball, but when they're out of possession, they kind of keep their shape and act like traditional fullbacks. They've also been asked to cross from the byline, and you can see that tackle harder and mark tighter instruction has been selected for these two fullbacks as well. They both have identical instructions. And then the ball playing defenders are selected in this tactic because I want my team to be the team that can start counter attacks from deeper areas. So the ball playing defenders, in contrast to the central defenders, they're not going to be very safe in possession of the ball. They're going to actually look to play counter attacking passes. The description says so here in the ball playing defenders. You can see that although the main objective of the ball playing defender is to stop attackers, he will obviously try to generate counter-attacking opportunities by playing defense splitting through balls from deep. My midfield consists of a central midfielder on support duty and a ball winning midfielder on support duty as well. The favorite role here is for me is the ball winning midfielder on support, because this is the aggressive presser in the team. The other central midfielder is also going to be responsible for pressing, but he's also going to have a more creative responsibility. So hold his position to act like a deep line playmaker, and then also close down more, mark tighter, and try to hassle the opposition. So everybody, you notice that most of my players do have the tackle harder and mark tighter instructions. That's because it's Atletico Madrid and I want them to be as brutal and aggressive as possible. I had two wide midfielders on either flank, but then I opted to change this guy because of Carrasco. I noticed that Carrasco is the one player that I remember plays in this role a lot, so that's why I'm opting for the inverted winger on attack duty, just to take more risk and try to be more creative, and then dribble more instruction is automatic for the inverted winger on attack duty. Close down more is also a given. And then you can see the wide midfielder on support duty. This player ideally is going to be Rodrigo de Paul or Correa sometimes, but Rodrigo de Paul most of the time. Take more risk, close down more, tackle harder, and mark tighter. He's going to be as aggressive as possible and also play on the wide area and try to support the fullback that is going to be getting up and playing those crosses from out wide. Now for the strikers, neither of them are on attack duty, and I know that's strange, but it sort of works in this tactic, and I think that's the way Diego Simeone deploys it as well. His strikers are not really out and out attackers like that, so there's a pressing forward on support duty. The reason why I'm opting for this pressing forward is because he has the attribute or the instruction to actually hold up the ball. The only other player that is able to do this is the target forward on support duty, and because the target forward is not going to press as much as I want him to press, I'm opting for the pressing forward on support duty that has the hold up play instructions selecting him. And remember, the goalkeeper has been instructed to actually play the ball to this player here. Beside him, you have a false 9 on support, and I also had a debate between the false 9 and the deep lying forward on attack duty. But I noticed that deep lying forward also tends to hold up the ball, and which is not what I want him to do. I want him to be a lot more free and run around a lot, not trying to be so stationary and get in vertical positions and just try to keep space and then get run ahead, and that's not what I'm looking for. I want him to be slightly deeper, even as much as the number 10 role, and then be all around in this region here as soon as I can get a hold of him. Just be all around in this region, hover all around this whole space and try to be like a 4-4-1-1 system and then a 4-4-2 system at the same time. So that's why I opted for the false 9 to play in that role. Now you notice that there are no set pieces instructions as selected for this tactic as well, so it's as blank as you can. In case you go on to pick up this tactic, you can actually include your own set pieces. So we'll take a look at the competition and see how well we did in the league. I'm going to ignore the Champions League now because I'm going to pretend we're not even in the Champions League, and then looking at the teams stats in review here. 2.69 points per game. This is probably the highest I've had with any team on Football Manager, and considering the fact that we're playing with a low block, it's actually perfect for Atletico Madrid. You can see that we have the least conceded in the league. After 13 games, we've only been able to concede 4 goals, and we have the most clean sheets with 10. This is probably the best defensive performance I've seen on Football Manager 2023, and it's not even complete yet. I'd like to say that Diego Simeone's tactical recreation here on Football Manager 2023 has been a huge success, and if you did enjoy this video, do let me know in the comment section what you think about this tactic, what you think about Diego Simeone's tactic, and remember to leave a like for this video as well. And if you like Football Manager content and tactical recreations like this, you can let me know what you have on your mind in case you want to see a different tactic created on Football Manager like this. And also subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll catch you guys with more videos like this. I'll see you in the next video.